think we can all agree that in Season 1 of Marvel Rivals, supports are completely broken, and Loki having the third highest support win percentage, according to Rivals Codex, makes Loki one of the best picks for competitive play. So that's why in this video, I'm going to teach y'all how to properly play Loki and get the most out of his kit. Make sure to like the video and subscribe for more guides. Let's get started. So first of all, let's talk about settings. Loki, like most characters in the game, has his own unique settings options. The one that I highly recommend you change right now is the alt selection option in the settings. What this setting allows you to do is confirm the alt you copy with Loki's alt before you transform. What it will do is give you the opportunity to change the person you copy if you misclick your alt. So definitely change that setting right away. Now, I'm going to assume that you know the basics of how to play Loki, so I won't go over his base abilities, but I will tell you how to properly use them. First of all, to get good at Loki, you have to learn how to micromanage the Loki clones. To maximize your usage, you need to make sure your clones are in advantageous positions so you can heal, do damage, escape, and survive all at the same time. The best way to do this is to put your clones in places that have line of sight on your teammates, but are also in places where the enemy will not destroy them easily. I see a lot of Loki players put all the clones in the same spot or right next to each other, but that simply doesn't work because they will be destroyed instantly by the opposing DPS, by a Squirrel Girl, or a Moon Knight. So make sure you spread them out around key points of the map, preferably on heights or in places where the enemy team can't easily attack them. Another tip is to place clones behind the enemy team because it draws the attention away from yourself and your teammates, and if they're not paying attention, they likely won't destroy them. This works extremely well against shield heroes like Doctor Strange. If you place a clone behind Doctor Strange and attack him from two angles, it can do damage to him from the back while he is trying to block you, and from the front while you yourself attack him. And of course, if he tries to turn around to break the clone, you'll have free shots onto him because now he'll be turned around against you. So you can effectively checkmate the other team by giving them no other option than to be eliminating. Spreading out your clones also allows for more healing potential. If your team is grouped up and you have clones in different positions, the chances of your clones hitting multiple teammates are way higher than if you put all your clones closer to each other and you just stand in between your clones. Flyer and flanker characters can sometimes be hard to deal with because they have a small hitbox and it's harder to do splash damage / healing on them, especially if they're flying. So in those instances, it's better to put the clones closer to those targets because it will lower the travel time of your projectiles, meaning you can be more accurate when you are healing allies or doing damage to the other team. So remember, put the clones closer for more precision and put the clones further away for a wider range of effect. The other clone skill you have to master is the teleport skill, which is arguably the best escape ability in the game. The best way to utilize this is to have a clone on a vantage point for your escape, and when the other team puts their attention on you, try to walk away from your clone and draw their attention, and then use the teleport. So once you walk away from your clone, you teleport, and then you play Ring Around a Rosie with the other team. And then this will buy your team precious time and also move the enemies into awkward positions. And remember that when you use your teleport, it will leave a clone where you were last standing. And if you had a teammate around you when you were escaping, you can also use your shift right away to give them some extra health and survivability. Also remember that you can teleport through walls and even the floor. So having a clone through the floor in some areas can be really good for escaping, and there's literally nothing the other team can do about it. But also remember that the teleport only has a 30-meter range, so make sure you stay within that range in order for you to escape. The other escape ability Loki has is the invisibility. Now this is not as reliable as the teleport when you're trying to run away because once you take damage, the invisibility will end. So the best way to use it is when you have no other option, or if you want to flank the other team and get a pick or get to a good spot to set up turrets, or if you want to, you can also steal the other team's ult out of your invisibility. The other amazing thing about the invisibility is that it will hide you from insta-lock ults like Psylocke's ult and Star-Lord's ult. So it's best to save this ability for those occasions because you can completely counter them, and unless they hit you, there's nothing they can do about it. The other nice thing about this ability is that once you are invisible, you can stay that way pretty much forever as long as you don't take damage or use another ability. But it does have a 15-second cooldown that starts after you come back out of invisibility, so keep that in mind. In fact, all of Loki's cooldowns are pretty long, so it's best not to use your abilities in a panic. And overall, Loki requires a lot of patience, map knowledge, and positional awareness. And not to mention a lot of creativity. Everyone plays Loki in different ways, and there are just so many different things you can do, especially when we talk about Loki's ult. And as much as I hate to admit it, in the season 1 meta, you really don't have a choice but to run a support ult when you copy ults as Loki. If you don't, you're pretty much just throwing. I would love it if using the other ults were more viable, but in this season right now, support ults are just so good. You can't win the game without them pretty much. Sure, in certain situations, copying a DPS or Vanguard ult might be the best option, but in general, probably want to copy the survivability and healing ults of other support characters, which include Luna Snow, Mantis, Cloak and Dagger, or Invisible Woman. If you don't copy these ults, you will just have less healing and less survivability, while the other team will most likely have 2 or even 3 survivability ults, giving them a huge advantage if you decide to copy a DPS or tank ult. Obviously, this might change depending on the meta, but as of right now, in Season 1, this is the state of the support role, and it's just best if you copy a support ult. Okay, so now that the abilities are out of the way, let's talk about character matchups. That means, when is it best to play Loki and when is it best to swap to another character? For example, if your team is not running a survivability / healing ult, it's probably the best idea to play something else. If your team is running 2 supports, for example, and your other support is a character like Rocket Raccoon or Adam Warlock, it's probably best not to choose Loki because, first of all, because there's not much use in copying your other teammate's support ult, and number 2, if the other team is running a survivability ult, then it might be harder or more inconsistent for a Loki player to try and copy the enemy. You can definitely do it, but if the other team is good, they will try to shut you down before you steal the ult. If you have a Luna Snow or Mantis on your team, for example, it's way easier to copy their ults without taking the risk of trying to get the opponent. Playing Loki is also not ideal depending on what DPS the other team is running. The biggest counter to Loki right now is definitely Moon Knight, especially with his recent buffs. Playing Loki into a Moon Knight is not ideal for your team at all. This is because the clones allow Moon Knight to bounce his attacks off of your clones and ultimately do more damage to your team. Sure, you might be able to put your clones in positions outside of the range of your allies, but even so, there's a high chance your team will play around your clones and then just get destroyed by the Moon Knight. So even if Moon Knight is not a direct threat to you as a Loki player, there's a high chance that playing Loki will be bad for your team as a whole. Another bad matchup is Black Panther, who can regain his dashes off of your clones and cause a lot of trouble for your team if you play Loki. Again, if your survivability skills are good, you can definitely avoid him as Loki, but you can't say the same for your teammates who will have a harder time against Black Panther because of your clones. You might say, oh, but you have the green runes to avoid all the damage. Yes, that's true, but remember, the cooldowns for this ability is so long that the Black Panther will just bait out your ability, then run away, and then come back when your ability is over and then just destroy your whole team. So it's just not worth it, and you should probably switch off at that point. Last but not least, the other terrible matchup is Winter Soldier. Again, this character gets a lot of value from destroying your clones. For example, when Winter Soldier uses his ult and does the again on your clone, he will get another charge to his ult. So all Winter Soldier has to do is shoot one of your clones and eliminate it, and then it will reset his ult, and then in the end he'll just do way more damage to your team. So it's not ideal to play Loki against these characters specifically. You might make it work in the lower ranks, but as you get into the higher ranks, the players are going to get smarter, and they're just going to completely counter you with these characters. And another sort of soft counter to Loki is Mantis, because if Mantis headshots a Loki clone, she will still get her leaves back, which means if you put your clones in bad positions, you can give the opposing Mantis player more healing and more damage buffs, all from your clones. So make sure you don't unintentionally buff the other team with your bad clone placement. Despite all that, Loki is still a very strong pick, especially in competitive. As I said, he is actually very strong against a lot of the characters, especially those who have insta-lock ultimates like Psylocke and Star-Lord, and he's very good against characters who have destructible abilities like Groot or Penny Park, because Loki can destroy their abilities very quickly, and his abilities can easily counter their ults, especially Groot's ult. When Groot ults your team, all you have to do is press shift and it will counter the ult. For extra safety, you can even press E first to put another clone down on your feet and then press shift, and you can easily tank a lot of damage. Of course, if they follow up with a Moon Knight ult, then you will probably die. But again, as I said before, you shouldn't be running Loki against Moon Knight in the first place, right? Because he's a very hard counter to Loki. And when it comes to insta-kill ults like Iron Man's ult and Magneto's ult, Loki can very easily counter them as well. All you have to do is use the same Green Runes ability, and you can take the ults as long as the enemy don't destroy the clones before the ult hits you. And not only that, you can also shield a lot of your teammates too, which is very useful, especially if your team is not running a shield like Magneto or Doctor Strange. In that regard, Loki can help make up for the lack of shields by eating up a lot of the enemy damage with those abilities. So for example, if your team runs a Venom Spider-Man comp, Loki is very good for this comp because he has the ability to shield the back line if the front line is spending most of the game diving the other team. Obviously, Loki is a very strong character in the game, but like all characters, you need to know when it's the best time to play him and when it's the best time to switch. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you learned something today, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, leave a comment if you have any questions or if you have any other tips as Loki players. And thank you all so much for all the support. I really appreciate it. And more guides and more gameplay videos on the way. Thank you so much. Good luck with all your games, and I'll see you next time.